much. The structure of this town hall may be virtual, but you will all have an opportunity to engage and interact with us, and you'll be muted, but you will have an opportunity to interact. And you'll do this in a manner in which you can post your questions on chat. Everyone will be muted, but you can post any of your questions throughout this town hall if your chat. Now, down at the bottom of your screen, you should see a button with a little emblem that says chat. So just type any of your questions or your comments in there, and Dr. John Stone, who is the co-moderator, will be there to receive your questions. And as a matter of fact, throughout the Q&A, those questions will be shared with the audience. So we're going to move along. I want to start with asking for Reverend Dr. Ralph Lassiter of the Mount Moriah Baptist Church, who's with us, and then Reverend Walter Jones of the New Beginning Baptist Church. You've met Reverend Arvey of the Great Mount Nebo, and thank you for that prayer. Reverend Lassiter, do you have any comments on behalf of the churches?
I do. First and foremost, I do want to thank all of the health ambassadors and the health advocates for all of their hard work over the past year, and Dr. Kosoko Lasaki and her entire team. I think we are where we are today in terms of being on the downside of the mountain because of your hard work. From my perspective, the space that we live in today has really evolved over the past year. I recall in March of 2020, we were simply encouraging members of our congregations to wear masks, to wash your hands, to social distance, to do those things, because at that time we thought that that was the answer. But we know it wasn't. And so all of the churches stopped live in-person worship. We began to do live streaming, and some churches even simply recorded their services. And while all this was going on, the numbers were going up. They started out in terms of the number of deaths, 4 figures, 5 figures, 6 figures, and now we're at almost 600,000 individuals who've lost their lives. But I believe that we're at the top of the mountain, and I believe that we're on the downside of the mountain, as a matter of fact. But we surely can't get to the bottom of the mountain unless we encourage everybody to vaccinate, because as most of you probably heard me say, the virus kills, the vaccination doesn't. So I want to thank again all of the health ambassadors, Creighton University, for their hard work in getting us to where we are today. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Lassiter. I really appreciate those comments, and we appreciate your support. Now, allow me to share with you who we are. When we speak about the Creighton Center for Promoting Health and Health Equity, it is a community academic partnership to improve health outcomes in Omaha and in the region. Under the leadership of Dr. Kosoko Lasaki and Dr. John Stone, our partners are community leaders who are key organizationals and multidisciplinary folks and Creighton University faculty. They have expertise in healthcare, in healthcare research and education. Together, we aim to promote health and health equity, to reduce health disparities in our populations. Our partners have collaborated for over 15 to 20 years in addressing health issues in our community. And we have a great deal of thanks to Dr. Kosoko Lasaki and the Creighton University team and all of the academic partners. We were initially identified to work with cardiovascular disease and HIV/AIDS, as well as chronic disease, basically with health disparities. Now, of course, we're dealing with COVID-19. And so I would like to introduce now our featured panelists. Today we have, again, Dr. Kosoko Lasaki.
Good morning.
Good morning. Would you introduce yourself, Dr. Kosoko?
So again, I'm Dr. Shade Kosoko Lasaki, and I am representing Creighton University. And I want to thank the Lord for today, which is a great day for us all, There's no rain, there's sunshine, and it's a time for us to think about health. And Pastor Lassiter said it's focused on COVID vaccine, and you'll hear more from the group. Thank you.
Thank you. And we also have with us Dr. Kate Note. Please introduce yourself, Kate.
Good morning, everyone. It is an honor and a blessing for me to be here with all of you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about the vaccine. I am on the faculty at Creighton University, the Graduate Schools program, the Masters of Public Health program, and I'm also the coordinator for the practicum, where my students are out in the communities and working in public health.
Thank you. And now we also have our very own Dr. Derek Anderson at Charles Drew. Would you introduce yourself, Dr. Anderson?
Hello, I am Dr. Derek Anderson. I work at Charles Drew, and we serve our underserved community along with One World that does the same thing. And as a group, our goal is to get some education out to our community. So we've all dedicated ourselves to that, whether it's on foot or through our offices.
Thank you. Thank you. And now, you know, we have some great soldiers in the field. We have some community health ambassadors who I would like to introduce to you. Dr. Reverend Walter Jones. He is pastor of the New Beginning Community Baptist Church. And Miss Renee Jones, who's also with the New Beginning Community Baptist Church. We see that we have Mrs. Sharon Ellis with Mount Nebo Baptist Church, Miss Christina Key of Mount Nebo Baptist Church. Welcome. Thank you for being a part of this effort. And of course, our very own Mount Moriah Health Advocates. We have Mrs. Sandra Baltimore, Minister Talmadge Baltimore, and Sister Cynthia Wallace. We appreciate our soldiers being out there, being as community health advocates, as faith-based health ambassadors, and they have been out here for such a very long time. Let me share with you about our objectives today. We are planning to explain the science and safety of COVID-19 vaccine. I will ask our technician to please put up the slides or share the screen so I may share that information, please. Well, I'll continue until he gets that screen sharing available to me. We're going to explain the science and safety of the COVID-19 vaccine. We're also going to understand why race is a factor with COVID-19, as well as talk about some of the new COVID vaccine guidelines and the myths and the facts that we've seen. And then we want to hear from you. We want to learn from you, the community, during our Q&A. But remember now, all through the chat, through the town hall, you can put your questions in the chat. All right. So our next conversation is to talk about why the vaccine is important. And Dr. Kosoko Lasaki will be coming to you to speak on why the vaccine is important, as well as, but before she does, I want to talk to you about some data. And Mr. Technician, would you please put up the slide on the data slide so all can see? The data is as follows. They're having some technical difficulties apparently. In the US, there were 592,776 deaths overall. So when we say, why is it important to get the vaccine? Let's take a look at these numbers. There are 2,249 deaths from COVID-19 just in Nebraska. And this source comes from Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services. We have 724 deaths alone in Douglas County, and 63% of the people have received one vaccination in the US. When I looked at the national efforts, I just wanted to see, okay, well, what's going on in Douglas County? What's going on with our efforts? And I'm looking at the Douglas County dashboard. And by the way, you can go on the Douglas County dashboard. Every day they update and you will see where our numbers are, how many people are being vaccinated. So let's take a look at this compared to the other states. In Nebraska, when we look at the population with people with just one vaccine, it shows that whites are at 49% and Blacks are at 30%. The Native Americans, and I'm looking at this carefully, 41.1%, the Asian 51%, and the Hispanic at 38%. That's with at least one dose. Now, when I look at who's fully vaccinated, who's gotten both vaccines or the required vaccines, it appears that there are, let's see here, whites at 45.1%, Native Americans at 32%, Asian Americans at 44%, Hispanics at 32.2%. Blacks are at 25%. That is too low. We need to do something about that. That's why you are here today. We need your help. We want to spread the word about the importance of the vaccine. And so when we look at this, we're trying to figure out nationally, people were dying. And as a matter of fact, people were dying, Black people were dying, and minority people were dying. Racial and ethnic rates were extremely high compared to the other populations. So coming before us now is Dr. Kosoko Lasaki, who's going to be discussing the effects of COVID-19 on people of color.
So, thank you, Mrs. Lassiter. This is a reflective time for every one of us who is on this forum. When you think about the rate at which individuals of color are dying, we have to do something about it. And the only solution that we know now is the vaccine. So let's look at why minorities are dying. Because we started from the bottom part of the whole picture. Minorities tend to have more chronic diseases like high blood pressure, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer. And so we are sicker than the general population. When you look at the kind of work that minorities are employed at, most of their jobs cannot be done from home. When you look at the household, because these are things that promoted the effects of COVID. So when you have to leave your house and go to work, and you are now working like in the meat packing factories, very close to someone else, and they say keep 6 feet distance, but you have no choice because you have to take food and bread home to your family. You are working very close to others. You live in households where you have multiple generations. So you have the grandma, great grandma, all living in the same household with the younger people. And then you have this stress, because who gets a disease? Who gets bacteria, virus, whatever, disproportionately individuals who are also impacted by racism. So every day you are thinking about, oh my God, I don't know if they like me. I don't know if they're trying to get rid of me. So the immunity that we start out with is very low. And so the exposure that we all had to this virus thinking about the numbers that the Lassiters have talked about. More than 600,000 people died in the world. Why can we not do something about this?
Well, I thank you, Dr. Kosoko Lasaki. And can you share with us a little bit about the impact? Could you say that some of this has been impacted by bias and systemic racism in the healthcare system?
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer, but I would try. Because yes, we know there's something called implicit bias. Implicit bias, some other people call unconscious bias. So you don't know you have it. You don't know you're stereotyping people. You don't know you are being mean to people, but it's happening because the end result is that because folks are not comfortable dealing or talking with the social issues that comes with the package of a disease, individuals are less likely to be treated as equals with everyone.
Thank you. So how would you share with your colleagues or with the other doctors? What should they do differently than based upon what you've just said? What can we do with your training, what you're doing now with the pre-med students and all of the great work that you're doing in Creighton? Are you incorporating this with your training of the students?
Yes, we are. So we have electives where the students are free to learn about racial bias. Individuals learn cultural competency, how to deal with folks, because it's not just enough to say, I treat everyone the same. You have to stop,
Yes.
listen, and take into consideration the fact that people are different. And when we talk about bias, we're not just talking about race. We're talking about individuals that are LGBTQ, individuals that have different religion, because we have Muslims, we have people from different religions, we have folks who are from rural areas, rural Nebraska, compared to the city people.
Yes.
And it goes on and on. So when you talk about bias, I don't want you to just think it's the color of the skin. It's a stereotyping that we have grown up with. And now, because things are changing, we have to stop. And Creighton is beginning to address these issues, absolutely.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the great work you're doing as well with your students. Now, I'd like to move on to getting down to the nitty gritty of how do the vaccines work? So many people have had questions about this vaccine. How does it work? It was really quick and all of this. Dr. Note, can you share with us a little bit about the science of the vaccine? Share with us, give us that information about the vaccine development availability.
I would absolutely like to do that. Do we have the ability to share screen yet?
Yes, Mrs. Lassiter can put up her slides.
No, I cannot. The technician has said that we are doing it without slides.
Okay, all right. So thank you all again for allowing me to share this information with you. What I want to start with is really where we want to end up, and that is that everyone chooses to get the COVID-19 vaccine. That's our end goal, right? Because the purpose of the vaccine, and any vaccine really, is to train your immune system to recognize and fight whatever the virus is that you could come in contact with in real life, real time. That virus, in this case, for this conversation, of course, is COVID-19. So the development of the vaccine for the COVID-19 vaccine started on a timeline that is accelerated from the usual timeline of a vaccine development. So the reason for that, of course, is because, as you heard earlier, the numbers, the sheer volume of people that were dying from the disease and having these or surviving it, but going through very long traumatic ventilators and symptoms and hospitalizations, we needed to accelerate the timeline. But what's really important to understand about this is that the normal timeline for a vaccine development is 5 to 10 years. We needed the accelerated timeline due to the global nature of this pandemic. And so the steps that you would take, a company would take in the 5 to 10 year scenario were the same exact steps that were taken in the accelerated timeline. No one was allowed to skip any steps. What was happening was the timeline was actually just accelerated. So in a preclinical trial, let's say, you probably hear clinical trial a lot. This is where they're experimenting and testing in a lab in the preclinical. So instead of a year or two, it's accelerated to a few months. But in that stage, that's where they're testing on mice or rats, and then they move to larger mammals like monkeys who are closer to who humans are. And so they're immediately looking for safety and immune response. That starts from day one. If things pass the muster, if you will, in the animal testing phase, the preclinical trial phase, they will move to a small phase 1 clinical trial. It's very, very strict and laid out. Again, it normally might take, you know, a year or two in the phase 1 clinical trial, but for the purpose of a pandemic, it's more like 2 to 3 months, because we need that time to at least test 2 doses, and we'll get to why that amount of time is important for immune response. But again, safety monitoring and immune response is what's happening from the minute this process starts. And sometimes in this accelerated timeline, they combine phase 1 and phase 2 because they can get to safety. In phase 2, they start to increase the amount of volunteers they have. They move to humans, and they start to look for healthy volunteers, typically several hundred people. And here's what's important in phase 2. They start to look at the diversity of the population of people that are volunteering. They start to look at people from different races. They start to look at individuals with different health issues, different sexes, different ages, and they look for the same thing, safety and immune response. And it doesn't move to another phase until they are sure that these are effective and safe and give us the immune response we need. In the phase 2, it's shortened to a 3 to 4 month.
That would be fine with me, except
phase 3 trials are where we are now, still assessing the effectiveness and safety. And again, it's a shorter timeline. Again, after all of the safety and effectiveness are established in these different phases, then there's that long approval phase. For us, in a pandemic, we needed an emergency use authorization. And that's what we had, not full licensure, but an emergency use. And then the manufacturing gets ramped up so that we can have millions of doses out there. Remember, we have 2 doses for the 3 vaccines. We have 2 doses for the 2 vaccines, 1 dose for the 3rd, and we'll talk about that shortly. These vaccines will have to go through an extensive licensure process after the emergency has passed. We are still in a pandemic, and we still need the vaccine to be in an accelerated timeline for now to be sure that everyone who's eligible can get the vaccine. So what's interesting about this process is that the work for the type of vaccine we use at Pfizer and Moderna, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are what's called mRNA vaccines. That is a technology that actually started 30 years ago by 2 doctors, Dr. Carrico and Dr. Wiseman. They're immunologists and biochemists. And they were working on this therapeutic use of mRNA, which we'll talk about. It has evolved, of course, over 30 years, become very advanced technology, which gave us the ability out there at the pharmaceutical company places to Moderna and Pfizer to develop these vaccines quickly. So really this work began 30 years ago. So currently there's 3 COVID-19 vaccines. There's the Pfizer one, that's 95% effective. And again, that was determined in the phase 2, beginning phase 1, phase 2 of the testing. Moderna is 94.5% effective. And Johnson & Johnson is 85% effective. Now, what this means is, what are they effective at? They're effective at preventing the severe disease. If you remember early on in the pandemic, as was referenced earlier, we all had encountered stories about, or maybe experienced in our own families or with friends, that the disease before the vaccine, if you got it, potentially you could end up, someone could be on a ventilator, have long-term issues with breathing and pneumonia, and it was hard, these kind of terrible stories. These vaccines are 85 to 95% effective at preventing the severe symptoms. And of course, the death, over 600,000 deaths to date. So there's different types of vaccines. There's viral vector vaccines, which Johnson & Johnson uses. And those vaccines, so the coronavirus itself it's named the way it is because it has crown-like spikes on their surface. They're called spike proteins. And those are ideal targets for the vaccines. We want the vaccine to target those proteins. In the type of vaccine Johnson & Johnson has, the viral vector, that uses a very harmless version of some type of virus that's different than the coronavirus. That's called the vector. And it sends information to these to protect you when you get the vaccine. Once you get the vaccine, it teaches your body how to make copies of these proteins. And that's how your body's going to recognize it. If you actually encounter in real time the coronavirus, the body's going to recognize it and go, oh, I know what this is. We're going to launch the soldiers of the immune system, the antibodies, and start to fight off the virus. The mRNA vaccine, which is Pfizer and Moderna, that's the M is messenger RNA. The mRNA is genetic material that tells your body how to make proteins. When I say genetic, I do not mean DNA. This does not interact with DNA at all. The mRNA vaccine teaches the cells to make copies of that spike protein I just mentioned. And if you're exposed to the real virus later on, your body's going to recognize it. And again, those soldiers of your immune system, the antibodies, are going to recognize it, and they're going to launch the immune system to start defending the body against severe symptoms of the disease, the coronavirus. So as I mentioned, we've got emergency use authorization for Pfizer, for Moderna, and for Johnson & Johnson vaccines. The two Moderna, the Pfizer and Moderna, are 2 doses. And it's important that if you get the vaccine, that you get it from the same manufacturer for both doses. The first dose is what primes your immune system against the virus. The second dose is where you get the full protection. The Johnson & Johnson is just 1 dose vaccine. So they're 2-dose series. So in the Pfizer, you are given the first dose, and then 21 days apart, you'll get the second dose 21 days later. When you go to this clinic or wherever you go to get your vaccine, they will give you your first dose, and then at that same time, they will schedule your second immediately after that. They'll count the days, then they'll give you a card, you'll record it. You'll know when you need to go back and get that second Pfizer one 21 days later. Moderna is 28 days apart, same process. Both doses are necessary, again, to get that full protection. There's no live virus. It's that mRNA that we were talking about, doesn't interact with DNA at all. And if you're scheduled to get a different type of vaccine, let's say flu or shingles or something else, they should not be administered at the same time. There should be 14 days or more. You want to check with your healthcare provider before proceeding to a different type of vaccine, but we know that it's safer 14 days after receiving the COVID-19 vaccine to get the other vaccines, but check with your healthcare provider. And we now know that the FDA has cleared the Pfizer vaccine only at this point for those ages 12 to 19. So earlier I mentioned that, could we go ahead a slide, please? Actually, go back, please. Previous, keep going back, please. And okay, these slides are okay. Yes, thank you. The FDA has cleared the Pfizer vaccine for those ages 12 to 19. So what this means is that those trials that I've been talking about have found safety and effectiveness in the Pfizer vaccine for younger children. The other vaccines have not been approved yet for younger ages. Next slide, please. So as I've been discussing all along, vaccine, keep going, please. Next slide. There are some side effects. So when I mentioned earlier that there's an immune response, sometimes that can cause some side effects, but they're not very serious in most cases. There may be some pain at where you got your injection, maybe some fatigue, maybe a little headache. Most of these are only around for a day, day and a half. And what that means is your immune system is responding to the vaccine. It's very mild, sometimes moderate, different for everyone, could get some fever. The fact that some may get it, some may don't, is an individual thing. Some people may get it more than others because they may have medical conditions underlying that require that the immune system is working to like a double duty kind of thing. It's really not clear as to why some people will get it and some people won't, but they are keeping track of who's responding and which of those signs and symptoms are coming up more often. So again, this is an ongoing, evolving situation, but we had a crisis and we needed to protect everyone. And so there's fewer side effects in older age groups. Next slide, please. So as I've mentioned many times, vaccine safety starts in the lab. And if it's not safe for animals, it's certainly not going to be safe for humans. So it would have never moved to the place that we're in currently. So it's recommended COVID-19 vaccines are safe for pregnant women and those who are breastfeeding. It is also, contraindications mean that you shouldn't get the vaccine if you've had some type of allergic reaction to others or a previous COVID-19 vaccine. Should always check with your healthcare provider before you do get vaccines to be sure. Next slide, please. Johnson & Johnson, as you may have already heard, had a pause in late April on their vaccine because there was a very small group of people, women ages 18 to 48. There were 6 cases at the time it was announced that had received this vaccine and had blood clots that mysteriously appeared. And so since then, they have found that the vaccine is safe and they've relaunched it. There's almost 8 million doses that have given so far in the US, and still a very, very small fraction of people have suffered these signs and symptoms. And you can see there's severe headache, backache, leg swelling, maybe some easier bruising. But again, this doesn't happen with everyone. It's a very small, currently it's a very, very small fraction of the people who get it. Those clots they have found occurred 16 to 13 days after the vaccine was given. They have now launched Johnson & Johnson again because an independent advisory committee found that it was safe to do so. Next slide, please. So of course, we've all heard that there have been variants. So what does that mean? The original form of the virus has mutated. It's changed over time. And it appears that these changes, called variants, could be more severe in people who have not had the vaccine, or more severe in just in general. The original vaccine changed. How it infects the body, it's now varied in multiple different mutations around the world. We do have these variants here in this country. The one that came from the UK is B1117. So if you see that in the press or if you see that somewhere, that's the code for the UK variant. It's more deadly than the others, and scientists are still studying exactly how it works in the body. It's been in the United States since December 2020, and currently there's 20,915 cases in the US of this. There's one from South Africa, it's code B1351. Some shared mutations as the B117. It's been here since January 21, 453 cases of the South Africa version of this in this US. And then the Brazil P1 code, same thing, it is here in the United States since January 2021, 497 cases. Next slide, please. So another good reason to get the vaccine, right? Because it is found that the vaccines do protect against these variants. COVID-19 continues to spread, so we want to protect yourself as well as those around you. you could be a carrier and not know it. So you could still spread this. So you get the vaccine, take the steps to protect yourself, get the COVID-19, continue to wear a mask that covers your nose and mouth, because if you are out in crowds, if you're going to concerts, festivals, that, you know, the things are opening up. You still have to use some thought, give some thought to protecting yourself and your loved ones. Wear those masks to protect you. Stay 6 feet apart from other people. Avoid crowds, especially in poorly ventilated indoor spaces. Continue to wash your hands and practice good hand sanitizing if soap and water aren't available.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr.
Absolutely.
No,
Thank
we
you.
appreciate this. We have an opportunity now to hear from Dr. Anderson, and he's going to be talking about some of the vaccine guidelines that are new. CDC put out some new guidelines and some vaccine hesitancy. And please continue to post in the chat your questions. I see some of your questions, and Dr. Stone is going to be sharing some of those questions and responses with you. So Dr. Derek Anderson and Charles Drew, would you like to get started, please?
Okay. So we've heard the information on the vaccines and how does this vaccine, how is it going to change our lives? So if you become fully vaccinated and you've gotten both of your shots and it's been 2 weeks, now they're saying that you're not required to wear a mask. We don't have the mask mandates, but still some stores will require masks. Some of the stores, I've seen flyers that say their employees that are fully vaccinated aren't required to wear masks either. And so eventually we will get back to doing some routine stuff, but it's recommended that you be fully vaccinated. If you're in a mixed group and you don't know that everyone has been vaccinated, it's recommended that you wear a mask because you still want to protect yourself and protect others. So you're still recommending social distancing and small groups when you don't know the makeup of your group. That doesn't change. And washing your hands and social distancing is still standard stuff. Yes, we've made a difference with the vaccinations. The numbers are coming down, but they're hoping that we don't get too complacent about not getting the vaccinations. And there's some of the problems with getting the vaccinations. So why are some of our people not getting vaccinated, and why are our numbers so low? 25% is a low number compared to the country being about 51%. Why are we so low? I think it's because of our education and our lack of interest in taking effort to get to those clinics that are available in North Omaha and South Omaha. They're available for the vaccinations. We have to take advantage of those opportunities, whether you get them from the CHAs or you get them from your medical providers. They should have that information where the vaccines are, and you know, we don't take advantage of that opportunity. We can't blame it on it's only because I'm Black or brown. That information is out there. And then once you take part in that information, we're encouraging you to share that with others because we don't have access to some of the other ways to get that information out there. Whether it's the TV or the radio, we don't see commercials that are directed toward our communities. So as part of this group, that's our goal, to take the information that we've been taught and share that with others, with friends, with everybody. Like I said, the vaccines are going to change the way we live our lives, and people that want to get back to going to larger groups and shows should be encouraging others to get vaccinated as well. Sister Lassiter, I can't hear you.
mute. I've got to learn how to do this again.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. We appreciate your continued support and the information that you're sharing. Again, people can go on CDC's website and see the new changes, the facts, when, where you can wear a mask, who should wear a mask, who shouldn't be wearing a mask. We know that if you're completely vaccinated, that you don't have to wear a mask. But there's one question that I have to, as moderator, take lead here. There was a question about, even though you've been vaccinated, you could still give the virus to someone else. Is that true?
Right, because the vaccine, the goal is to decrease the effect of having COVID. So your illness will be less. It does not keep you from getting in contact with the vaccine, with the virus. And if you get in contact with the virus but don't get sick, then you could still pass that to someone else. It doesn't prevent you from getting the virus. So people that think you get the vaccine and you'll never have the virus are untrue, because you could get what we call breakthrough cases, that vaccinated people will get COVID still. You just don't have the serious side effects as you would if you had not been vaccinated. And that's what the goal of decreasing those side effects with the vaccine.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Now let's get down to the myths and the facts, the questions that we've had from community. Our community health ambassadors, our faith-based health ambassadors have been out in the field, and they have been hearing, and they want to share with you now some of the myths and things that they've heard. Miss Ellis from Mount Nebo Baptist Church, I believe you wanted to have a discussion about the racial and ethnic minorities not being enrolled in the clinical trials. What did you find out?
Yes, that's the first myth, that no racial and ethnic minorities were enrolled in the COVID-19 clinic trials. And actually, the clinic trials for the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine have enrolled over 30,000 participants, of which 37% come from racial and ethnic minorities. The Pfizer trials enrolled over 44,000 participants, of which 42% come from racial and ethnic minorities. So the COVID-19 vaccine trials have officially become among the largest vaccine trials ever undertaken in the United States.
Thank you for sharing that information. And you got that from the National Institutes of Health. And then Ms. Wallace, can you speak to people who talk about that they're not sick, they should be fine, because even if they had COVID, they've already been immune. So what's the fact? What are you going to respond? How do we respond to people who say that?
Well, according to the CDC, the immune response to COVID is just temporary, maybe approximately 90 days, but you can still get the virus, and there are strong virus variants out in the community, and risk a higher or more severe symptoms. And I feel that people do feel that way, that they don't have to worry about getting a vaccine because they've had it, which is not true.
All right, thank you. And another that we've had from a question that we've had from about the vaccines were rushed to be made, and Dr. Note kind of explained that, but let's go through that again. I've heard this often. I'm not getting it because the vaccines were rushed to be made. I'm going to be the last in line. I don't want to get it right now. Let everybody else go to the front of the bus. I'll stay in the back of the bus right now. So let's understand that fact. Why isn't that true?
The reason it seems like it was rushed, it took less time to make than the normal time, is that too many people were dying of COVID daily. The government did pull money and resources to respond to that as fast as they could. They did not skip any steps in making this vaccine. They just put the money behind making it to happen faster. Also, COVID-19 vaccines were evaluated in 10,000 of the participants in clinical trials. The vaccine met FDA rigorous scientific standards for safety, effectiveness, and manufactured quality needed to support emergency use authorization. So everything was safely done and effectively.
All right, thank you for researching that for us and that myth. And then the next myth is that we hear a lot of this all the time. The vaccines are going to alter your DNA. What does CDC say about that? Minister Baltimore, I think you researched this one.
Yes, and what the CDC says about that is that the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines give instructions for ourselves to make a harmless piece of what is called the spike protein. And the spike protein is found on the surface of the virus that causes COVID-19. Now, the mRNA vaccines do not use any live virus that causes COVID-19 in the first place and do not affect or interact with our DNA in any way.
Thank you, Reverend Baltimore, for sharing that research information with us. And then the next one about being magnetic. You get the COVID-19 vaccine, they're going to put chips and tracers. Sister, I think Jones, you researched this piece. Can you share with us about this information, please?
Yes, I can. No, the COVID-19 vaccine does not inject magnetic tracers or chips at the site of the vaccination, which is usually in your arm. COVID-19 vaccines do not contain ingredients that can produce an electromagnetic field at the site of your injection. Also, all COVID-19 vaccines are free from metals such as iron, nickel, cobalt, lithium, rare earth alloys, as well as any manufactured products such as microelectronics, electrodes, carbon nanotubes, and nanowire semiconductors. So no, you cannot cause you to be magnetic.
All right, so no one's putting tracers or chips in the arms. Now, this one we hear a lot from, particularly our young men, says I'm healthy and I work out. I don't need the vaccine. I'm not sick. I work out. I don't need it. Reverend Jones, what do you say about that? What did you find out about that?
Well, thank you, Mrs. Laster. I thank Dr. Noel for saying something about this, making it clear. But the virus, we have to realize whether you're sick or well, the virus is still out there and there's a danger in becoming very sick, increasing with this new variant that's coming out now. The truth of it is this new stronger variants are present in Douglas County and especially amongst our young people.
Yes, they are. And as you can see here, that you can be healthy one day, like this picture showing, and very sick and on a ventilator the next. So thank you for looking that up and sharing that information with us, and finding out what all of our health ambassadors have been very good about looking at what the myths are and out in the community, discussing it with the health experts. What is the answer? So they can go back out into the field and share the correct information according to CDC. The next one we're hearing, this recently came up and is on the CDC website as an additional myth. A lot of people are inquiring about this. Can being near someone who received a COVID-19 vaccine affect your menstrual cycle? Sister Baltimore, what do you say about that?
Yes, Sister Lassiter, no, your menstrual cycle cannot be affected by being near someone who received a COVID-19 vaccine. Also, many things can affect menstrual cycles, including stress, changes in your schedule, problems with sleep, and changes in diet or exercise. In fact, they all affect menstrual cycles.
Thank you very much. And then the other one that's coming in from a lot of women who are thinking about having a baby. Is it safe for me to get a COVID-19 vaccine if I would like to have a baby one day. And I will respond to this and say, yes, if you're trying to become pregnant or want to get pregnant in the future, you may get a COVID-19 vaccine when one is available to you. And now they're available to everybody, right? So currently there's no evidence that COVID-19 vaccines cause any problems with pregnancy, including the development of the placenta. And in addition, there's no evidence that fertility problems or side effect of any of the vaccine, including the COVID-19 vaccines. Here's my concern. If you are pregnant and you don't get the vaccine and you end up with COVID, then you're putting your life and the baby's life at risk too. So I will encourage all women even if you're pregnant, to please get the vaccine. Please get the vaccine. There is another rumor out there. You get too many side effects from the vaccine. And we've talked about that. And we know that the risk of death or long-term effects from COVID-19 infection are much greater than any observed vaccine side effects that we've seen. So yes, you have that. Sometimes you have a side effect that Dr. Anderson explained and others have talked about, the sore arm, fever, temperature. It feels like you have COVID. But you know what? I would rather have a day or two and rather than not having a lifetime of good life here. So here's another that's come out on the website for CDC. It's new. Talks about shedding. Do any of the COVID-19 vaccines authorized for use in the United States shed or release any of their components? And the answer, according to CDC, is no. Vaccine shedding is the term used to describe the release or discharge of any of the vaccine components or inside or outside of our body. And it can only occur when a vaccine contains a weakened version of the virus. None of the vaccines authorized for use in the United States contain a live virus. And so the mRNA and the viral vector vaccines will not contain that. Now, we've asked this question time and time again. Can the COVID-19 vaccine make me sick with COVID-19? The answer is no. No, none of the authorized and recommended COVID-19 vaccines contain the live virus. They cannot make you sick. I cannot tell you all how many times our health ambassadors said this is what they're hearing. They're afraid, people are afraid that the COVID-19 vaccine is going to make them sick with COVID, but it's just not in there. It cannot make you sick. And Dr. Anderson explained that too. So I would like to share with you some of my key takeaways from what I've heard from the health ambassadors, from Dr. Kosoko, Dr. Note, and from Dr. Anderson. The 3 available COVID-19 vaccines are very effective. And yes, they were developed quickly, but safely. We also learned that you cannot get COVID-19 from these vaccines. The risk of long-term complications, death from COVID-19 infection are greater than any potential vaccine side effects. If you don't have your vaccine, and if you do, continue to wear a mask, wash your hands, watch your distance if you have not been vaccinated. So what if you're still skeptical? Say, I've heard all of this. Some of you in the chat are making or sharing some very critical questions, and Dr. Stone is answering those questions and others, and we're going to entertain even more in a bit. Yes, you might be skeptical, and that's okay. We all need to be comfortable with the decisions of our health. But getting the vaccine protects others around you. We don't want to take this vaccine home to our grandmothers, our loved ones, our parents, even to our children. You know, children can get COVID-19 vaccine. We didn't hear about it initially very much, but we do recall of a daycare center where kids were impacted by the COVID-19. So getting the vaccine should be a shared decision, can be with you. Talk with your doctor, talk with your medical provider. But when you're ready and you want to get a vaccine, you can go to Charles Drew, you can go to One World, Douglas County Health Department. You can go to Douglas County Health Department's website and see the various clinics that are being held throughout Omaha, at the grocery stores, NOAA Clinic. They're all of, there's no reason why you can't get a vaccine. There are also too, I would say to you that there are many resources out there to you as well. But let me entertain some questions and answers. Dr. Stone, are you available to share some of the Q&A with us, the questions and answers? What are some of the questions that have come up? Let's see.
He's muted.
Dr. Stone on mute. He's not on yet?
He's still muted.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, we hear you now, Dr. Stone. Would you like to share some of the questions that we had from the audience?
Okay, so I've been putting, Dr. Deneen and I have been putting answers in the chat. Give me a minute and I'll go through some of those, and we'll ask Dr. Deneen if she wants to step in also.
There is
So-
one question that maybe Dr. Anderson and some of the others can ask. Is it known when the population of 11 years old and younger will be able to get the vaccine? Do we know that yet?
I don't think we know that for sure. I know that I think Dr. Stone had put in some links to some websites that have had that discussion, and one of the responses was that potentially September or October, but I did some review this morning even, and I didn't see anywhere that mentioned any younger patients than 12 being available to get that the vaccine yet.
Okay. Can Barbara and Bob Clay ask this? Can you please explain why some experience side effects and others don't?
Okay, so Dr. Deneen may want to weigh in. So first of all, we're talking about side effects of the vaccine. The short answer is I don't know why. People do vary. We know that we can't predict necessarily. Some people seem to know they have stronger reactions than others, generally with vaccines like the flu vaccines. But I was unable during this discussion to find anything more specific on that. Dr. Deneen, Dr. Anderson, anything on that?
No, everybody's different. And so your body responds differently to things put in it. So there's not a real good way to predict that.
We have a question from Janae Broom. She wants to know which one is better for people with allergies, which vaccine is better for people with allergies, and how intense are allergic reactions? Is there
Okay,
any
so
one better than the other?
I sent out a link that covered a lot of that in detail. Several issues there, but I'm going to ask Dr. Anderson if he wants to speak up to that first.
Well, I know that if you have a history of having severe reactions, you have to be cautious about taking the vaccine, and they want to monitor you and be prepared that you would have a serious reaction.
Okay.
Right, and if you've had any reaction in the past to what's known to be a component, then generally you shouldn't. And see the link that I put in the chat about that. If you did have a severe reaction to the first vaccine dose, then you're going to have to consider either nothing further or something different. Again, see the link about that.
So the other question is, Dr. Stone, thank you for responding. The long-term side effects, we've talked a little bit about that in our training, not a little bit, a lot about that. Can you explain? Someone is asking the question about the long-term side effects.
Dr. Deneen had a long response about that. Dr. Deneen, do you want to comment on that?
Oh, sure. So this is what we know. We know that we have long-term side effects of COVID-19 infection, right? We know that, and those are not mild in some cases, right? Some people are gravely ill to the point where they can't work or participate in their usual activities for a year out, right, or more. And scientists and doctors and everybody are looking at that. So that's COVID infection. Long-term side effects of COVID vaccine, and I posted a few links to the CDC website too. Well, first of all, we only have as far back as a little over a year of data because they started first testing of information, right? Because they just first started even giving the vaccines and the studies to people, I think late March, early April. But second, there have been no findings at all, according to the CDC, of any long-term side effects thus far. All of the side effects that have been reported are either immediately after or within 6 weeks of vaccination, right? And the CDC says that makes sense based on the way people react to other vaccinations, which is also really in line with that. Now, I don't know if one of the physicians want to jump in on that because, you know, I'm not an MD, but that's the information I found.
I have a question from Janine. Excuse me, go ahead if there's some more response to that question.
I'm just going to say, I mean, I agree and I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Janae Broom is asking, is there any, will the vaccine be less effective if you take other medications?
I haven't seen anything on that, but here's an exception. If people have a compromised immune system, if their immune system, let's say if they're on chemo drugs for cancer that's suppressing or reducing their immune system response, then their vaccinations will be less effective because their immune system naturally isn't able to respond as effectively.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from Dr. Stone or Dr. Deneen regarding that you'd like to share with everyone? Excuse me, has it been determined first of all, let me ask this question. Has it been determined if booster shots will be needed? This is from Barbara and Bob Clay.
What I've seen is yes, probably. And there's thinking that it's possible that the current vaccines may not be effective for more than 6 to 12 months. But again, as Dr. Deneen emphasized, the data is very limited. We just we're not far enough out on the results to predict for sure. But we should expect, and I expect to take a booster vaccination within the next year, and that's what we should expect.
All right. Are there any other questions for Dr. Anderson, Dr. Kosoko Lasaki, or Dr. Kate Note?
Can I ask a question or just share a question? Because
Sure.
I am still looking for documentation intermittently now for Clara, but I want to invite the doctors in particular to comment on this. So Clara had asked a question about, why vaccinate people under 70 because of the mortality rate being higher under 70, which I think I answered, and I think you answered too during the Q&A, but just to reemphasize that, yes, that was true at one time, but we really don't know the effects of these variants, and we're seeing increased hospitalizations of children and young adults. And even if people don't die, like death isn't the only reason to not get to get the vaccine, right? Because of all of these long-term side effects. But then the follow-up question, which I want to invite the doctors to comment on, and when I get a second, I'm looking for some studies for her, but why, for example, is Creighton requiring all the students to get vaccinated when they know, let me read it correctly, when they know that the risk of side effects from the vaccine are higher in this group? My initial response was, on balance, what we know, the risk of having an infection, even for young adults like that, is still higher than risk of the vaccine, absent knowledge of some other underlying medical condition, but I really want the doctors to weigh in on that. So why should a young adult get vaccinated?
Yeah, and what I reviewed this morning, the largest group, the growing number of adolescents are getting sicker and having more serious, troubles with the COVID, the virus. So of course we should be encouraged to quickly as quickly as we can to get those younger groups vaccinated.
Thank
And
you.
I would add to that,
Yes,
you know,
please do.
generally side effects are certainly annoying. Sometimes they can be really annoying. For one of my daughters is a nurse, and she generally reacts strongly to vaccinations, and she was really sort of wiped out for 2 to 3 days. But guess what? She's glad she took it, and she's protected. And she was laid out for about 3 days, but on the other hand, she's fully recovered, and that's pretty much what we always see. So
Thank
it's a
you.
nuisance, but I don't rate it generally as more than that.
I agree with Dr. Stone. The side effects of getting the shot are so minor that I think that you would strongly encourage adolescents and adults alike to get the vaccination.
You bet.
Thank you. As we move forward, will you go to the next slide, Mr. Technician, please? Thank you all so much for your questions and answers. We have last things we want to talk to you about. We want to share with you about our future COVID-19 vaccine town hall meetings coming up. The next one is actually June 15th. Combined churches of Pleasant Green Baptist Church, Cornerstone Deliverance, Bethesda Seventh-day Adventist, and the International Church that Christ built will be having their combined town hall on the 15th. The Omaha Housing Authority is having a town hall on July 1st at 1:30 p.m. Salem Baptist on July 8th. Zion Baptist Church, Antioch, Redeemed, and Worship Center combined will have their town hall meeting on July 10th. The Maya community on July 14th at 6 p.m. at the Maya Community Center. The Latinos community will be having theirs July 20th at 7 p.m. I will have to understand if anyone can tell me the location. I'm not sure where the location is yet, but we will have that out for you. It'll be on the Creighton website as well. The Maya community, we're having another one on July 28th. Also, there will be other events happening throughout the community where we'll be discussing COVID-19 vaccine, and actually there'll be vaccination clinics. Now, I will ask Dr. Kate Note to share with us, but before she does, I will ask each of you if you would share with us, just bow with us for a moment of silence. Our colleague, Dr. Jess Smith, passed away just 2 days ago in the middle of our planning this project and doing this work. And we were all very shocked. So would you just please just bow your head in a moment of silence. Thank you. Dr. Note.
Yes, thank you very much. So on behalf of the community health ambassadors and this project's leadership team, we want to thank you for attending this town hall meeting. And we hope that you'll carefully consider what you've heard today and share the information about the COVID-19 vaccine with your family, your friends, coworkers, and neighbors. And before we end the town hall, we're asking all of you to take a few minutes to complete a 10-question survey. Each question requires only that you click yes or no to record your answer to each question. To access the survey, if you're in Zoom, please look in the chat. You'll see a link. If you're on Facebook, you'll see the link in a comments box. There's 2 links actually, one for a survey in English and one for a survey in Spanish. Please check the title, you'll know which one, but please only select one of them, do not do both. Finally, once you've completed the survey, please stay in the Zoom or on Facebook for a few final announcements before we say goodbye. And thank you again for your time and attendance. And I'm going to ask Dr. Santiago Stomies to please take what I just read and translate it to Spanish, please. Dr. Santiago Stomas?
Sí, muy buenos días. A nombre de la comunidad de promotores y promotoras de la salud y el equipo organizador de este proyecto, queremos darles las gracias por su participación y esperamos que reflexionen, consideren y compartan esta información sobre la vacuna del coronavirus con su familia, amigos, colegas y vecinos. Antes de terminar esta presentación, le pedimos que se tomen unos minutos para llenar una encuesta de 10 preguntas. Cada pregunta requiere que usted conteste con un sí o con un no. Para poder tener acceso a la encuesta, debe hacer clic en el enlace que aparece en el chat en español por Zoom o en la cajita para hacer comentarios si usted se ha conectado por medio de Facebook. Miren el título y escojan el enlace en español y por favor solo llenar una de las encuestas, no las dos. Pero luego de terminar, finalmente, luego de terminar la encuesta, por favor quédense en línea para escuchar algunos últimos anuncios antes de despedirnos. Y otra vez, nuevamente, gracias por su asistencia y por su participación en este foro comunitario. Gracias.